I would recommend at an early stage for both organisations to set up a joint working committee to explore it further. So often that's made up of, say, a couple of board members from each side, possibly the two chief executives, and they just sit around a table and thrash out some of the issues. That's useful from a very early stage, and obviously some confidential information may only be shared once people have started to earn each other's trust, but to get talking early is really important. So there are a number of different ways structurally in which a merger can take place. Actually, at the simplest end, and sometimes to be recommended, is that one organisation just takes over the other, but both organisations continue to survive as legal entities. So you end up with a structure of effectively a parent and a subsidiary. Both organisations continue, and they can both retain their own separate identity, and you don't have to transfer staff, you don't have to transfer assets, but they are a united whole because they're part of the same legal group. Actually, that doesn't happen very often because I think people don't want the complexity of two organisations continuing. So then the alternative, you face the choice, if you've got two organisations structurally, which one survives, which one continues after the merger. One organisation will transfer its assets and its liabilities into the other. That's what a merger really is. And then it will cease to exist. You'll wind it up, it won't be on the company register anymore, it won't be on the charity register anymore. And sometimes when it's very difficult to decide which organisation should survive, and sometimes that's purely for emotional or political reasons, you end up setting up a brand new third entity, and into that entity all the assets of both organisations are transferred, and so that new entity survives and both of the other organisations cease to exist, and at least that way you don't have a fight over which one should continue once the merger's happened. Some of the other sort of key legal considerations that you look at an early stage are the compatibility of the objects of an organisation. In other words, these are the objects, the purposes that are set out in the Articles of Association. And in charity law, an organisation that has one set of objects can't necessarily take its funds and start using them for some other objects, for some other purposes. So you've got to work out whether those two sets of purposes are compatible, whether one can fit neatly inside the other, or whether in fact that's just not going to work. If you've got if one charity has got funds that are ring-fenced for, let's say, educational activities, and it's merging into an organisation, let's say for example that's an environmental charity, well those monies that are ring-fenced for education can't be used to protect the environment, conserve the environment. So you might say ultimately that merger just isn't going to work. It might sound obvious, but these are sometimes the things that only come out when you look at the technical legal details of what's in a governing document of a charity. I don't think organisations, to be a successful merger, I don't think they necessarily need to be doing the same thing. Often they can be doing very different things, but they need to be compatible. And so that compatibility of culture, of aspiration, of aims is very important. But in a way that's something that you can only figure out, you can only work out how that's going to be once you've started to get to know each other quite well. Of course, sometimes organisations that come to merge already know each other quite well. They've been collaborating sometimes for many years. And often those will make the best mergers because they already understand each other, and so it's only one further step to merge. I would say that getting some external help for an organisation to help decide, or two organisations to help decide whether they fit well with each other, is a really useful thing. It's actually quite hard for one organisation to look into itself and say, yes, I fit well with that other organisation, or even to look at another organisation and say, yes, it fits well with us. I think actually to have someone objective looking from the outside and making that assessment is incredibly helpful. It's not something for lawyers to do. We get stuck into the more technical details, but I think some kind of consultancy, some kind of external help there is really useful. So due diligence is a pretty critical aspect of a merger. It might send some people to sleep, but actually it can be really important because that's where you look into the workings of the organisation you're going to work with. And you need to know what they are, particularly if you're the recipient organisation. If the other organisation is merging into you, you need to know what you're taking on. And it's not just, are you taking on a whole load of debt, but it might be things like, are you taking on a property that's going to end up incurring a lot of cost in dilapidations? It might be, lurking in the background, is there a legal claim that's going to end up costing you thousands or tens of thousands of pounds? Because the principle of a merger, what happens is that the assets and the liabilities are taken on by the new organisation, and if they are taking on liabilities that they're not aware of, but they're promising to meet those liabilities, it could bring down a healthy organisation. It's a good question to ask how to be sure that a merger is going to be of benefit to the beneficiaries. And ultimately, I guess, you don't know, but I do think it's important where possible to try and involve them, to have some kind of stakeholder consultation in the process. It's very difficult to know at what stage of the process to do it, because the organisations have to be sufficiently committed to each other to make it worthwhile having that kind of exercise, but not so far down the line that actually the consultation is meaningless. I think the other thing is really the trustees, the people that are making the decision about the merger, should always be bearing in mind from the outset that a key reason for merger, probably the ultimate reason for a merger, is to benefit the beneficiaries. It's not about world domination, it's about, is this going to benefit the beneficiaries? And that should be at the heart of any decision to merge. Sometimes you get organisations which might have a wide membership, hundreds, maybe thousands of individuals actually have a role in the structure of the organisation. They come to an AGM, they vote, they can vote on hiring and firing the board. But other charities aren't made up in that way at all. They might just only have a handful of people who are the members, and actually sometimes it's the same people that are the trustees. If you're trying to bring together two organisations, one's got a culture of having an AGM once a year with 1,000 members turning up, and another is used to a tiny little AGM with only 10 people who all know each other because they're also on the board, that can be quite hard to fit together. It can be done, but it's something that's got to be considered at an early stage, how you're going to make that work.